Welcome to Before the Day Ends. So we're finishing up Matthew in the next lesson, maybe two, maybe one more after this one. Meanwhile, I'm also starting a series on Daniel for our small group. Now, I'm not going to publish those online. They're really just for our small group, for those who have missed and want to catch up. But if you're interested in getting access to those videos, please send me or Stacy your email address, and we'll add you to the list that sends you a link when those come out. So if you're interested in Daniel, just let us know. We'll include you on those videos as they come out. So today for Matthew, we are going to talk about the death of Jesus. So in Matthew, it's a little bit different in how Matthew tells this part of the story. First off, we know there are 7 sayings from the cross in the 4 Gospels. Only one of those appears in Matthew. So Matthew really focuses on one saying from the cross. So we pick up in chapter 27, Jesus is on the cross, and we have what he says, kind of the most important thing I think of this particular scene, from what he says to the people around them and how they understand it. So verse 45, from noon on, darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon. And about 3 o'clock, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. That is, my God, why have you forsaken me? When some of the bystanders heard it, they said, this man is calling for Elijah. So a couple things happening here. When Jesus cries out, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, he's quoting from Psalm 22, which begins that way. And Psalm 22 is often seen as a picture of the crucifixion. Rather than go that direction, I think Jesus is doing is calling back toward a psalm that was written by someone in great suffering. Yes, the two are very similar, but instead of seeing it as predictive of the crucifixion, see it more of Jesus connecting back to what had happened to others, that he identifies himself with those who suffer, that he's not aloof from it or apart from it. It really does affect him. He is suffering. Now, there are Christians who said, no, he didn't suffer. It was kind of, he was apart from this because he was God. But the reality is, here he connects with us, with our suffering, with those who suffered in the past. And he is saying, like others have said, my God, why have you forsaken me? I'm in this time of suffering, and it's hard, and it hurts, and it's pain beyond belief. And I'm calling out to God. God, I need you. Where are you? And so Psalm 22 is kind of pulled forward from the Old Testament to this moment. I encourage you to go back and read Psalm 22 and see how the person there goes through their suffering, how despite all that's going on to them, they still cry out to God. They don't leave God. They stay connected to God because they know that's their source of hope. So when we suffer, when we're going through our times of trial, when we want to cry out, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, we're calling out to God because we know that God is still there. We want to cry out to a God who hears us and cares. And although we feel abandoned, the reality and the truth is we are not abandoned, that God is still with us. And Psalm 22 captures that. And Jesus is kind of pulling that whole psalm here, that despite what it seems, despite what it looks like, that here is Jesus dying on the cross. People are making fun of him and mocking him and humiliating him. Despite all what seems, God is still very much with him. And that's who he trusts. Now the people, though, in verse 47, they hear this and they think he's calling out for Elijah. That's not what he's doing. It's because they misunderstand. And throughout the whole gospel, we see people who misunderstand what he's trying to do. So Eli, this word here, is Hebrew for my God. That's literally what it means. So in Hebrew, El is God, E is the my part, my God. What they think he's saying is Elijah. They're not getting what he's saying. They're not as familiar with Hebrew maybe, or they don't know the psalm, they don't know the scriptures, whatever reason. They misinterpret what he's saying, and they think he's calling out for Elijah. So, as has happened through the whole gospel, people here misunderstand. Now, verse 48. At once, one of them ran and got a sponge, filled it with sour wine, put it on a stick, and gave it to him to drink. But others said, wait, let us see whether Elijah will come to save him. I want to kind of focus for a second on this guy here in verse 48. whoever this nameless person is, at least they did something. If you go back and look at my book, I wrote a chapter about this very image here, that a lot of folks, I think, they want to stay in the background. They will either make fun, or they'll ridicule, or they'll criticize, but they won't get in there and help. Here's someone who sees someone suffering and is willing to do something about it. I think, again, too many of us fall into the category of either we'll criticize or mock, or just stay quiet and watch and see what happens. This person, when he hears Jesus crying out, whether he understands or not, goes and does something about it. Everyone else, let's just sit back and wait. And the truth is, we've talked about this before, there really is no fence. There is no waiting on the fence. You've got to pick a side. You've got to make a decision. You can't just sit with these people here in the crowd and, like cowards, just wait and see what happens. We have to take a side and make a decision. And here, verse 48, someone makes a decision to help. Verse 50, then Jesus cried again with a loud voice and breathed his last. So these are Jesus' last words. My God, why have you forsaken me? But he's still calling out to God. He still obviously trusts God, and God is there with him. This man helps him, and he cries and breathes his last. At that moment, verse 51, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. And what you see here is almost like God's, despite the death of his son, now the opening is made for all of us. At the moment of Jesus' death, God reaches down and tears this veil that separated us from God in the temple, this veil that kept us from a close relationship with God, grabs it and tears it from top to bottom. And now that way is open right there at the moment of Jesus' death. We have been given this new relationship as part of God's family. Like we said last week, we are now Barabbas, sons and daughters of God. Verse 52, the tombs also were opened, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. After his resurrection, they came out of the tombs, entered the holy city, and appeared to many. Now, when the centurion and those who were with him, who were keeping watch over Jesus, saw the earthquake and what had took place, they were terrified and said, truly, this man was the Son of God. So, who is it that first proclaimed Jesus as God's Son after his death? A centurion, a Gentile, an outsider, which we've been talking about throughout. We had the centurion occurring earlier. Now we have it back here again, that this is the one, this outsider centurion sees Jesus with the sign over his head that says, Jesus, King of the Jews, and says, no, that's Jesus, the Son of God. Verse 55, many women were there also, looking on from a distance. They had followed Jesus from Galilee and provided for him. So not only do we have now the centurion brought back, the outsider, now we have women brought into the picture too. So kind of like this is kind of coming full circle. Jesus had opened the way, broken the boundaries for the Gentiles and the women and the outsiders, people like us, to be part of the kingdom. And now here at his death, they're the ones who are first recognized and who are there, who are courageous enough to be there at the tomb and make the confession that, yes, this one who died for us is God's Son. So, again, a very, very important part of Matthew, where we see Jesus really connecting with us in his last moments, with our suffering, with our condition, and how he trusts God and calls out to God, and in the midst of suffering, like in Psalm 22, shows hope, brings hope to us, and opens the way to God through his death. And now we see also that those who are outside the kingdom, like us, are brought inside. We'll see you next time. We take a look at the resurrection before the day ends.